What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I have an X-Men book that I want to talk to you about. X-Men Blinded by the Light, written by Mike Carey with art by Humberto Ramos and Chris Bacalo. This collects issues 200 through 204 of the Adjectiveless X-Men series. And this book should have been renamed X-Men Messiah Complex Prologue, because basically everything that happens here is just setting up stuff that is then paid off in the Messiah Complex story. And in that regard, it feels less like its own story and more like an appendage to Messiah Complex. And so I don't like this arc as much as I like anything else that Mike Carey had done before this. In the Supernovas book that collects basically the first three storylines before this, I liked all of that better than this. Even the Dr. Pandemic story, which was, I felt, the weakest of the three that came before this, I felt like it was even better than this because it was adding new elements to the X-Men universe in the character of Dr. Pandemic. Now, it was setting up stuff that is now kind of playing out in this book, so in a way, it was kind of doing the same thing that this is, where it was setting up stuff that was later getting paid off, and then it's setting up stuff that's later getting paid off. So the Dr. Pandemic story kind of sort of has some stuff in common here, but even it was introducing new characters and new ideas into the X-Men world, which I feel like is desperately needed, and I talked about that a little bit in my review of the Supernovas book. But this book here is basically just saying, okay, you got this group of bad guys, they're all working together, and they are trying to prevent the X-Men from knowing what's going to happen in the future, so they're going around, they're killing precogs, and they're destroying any time travelers that they can find, and they're trying to find the Destiny's Diaries, which tell of the future, and they're trying to destroy those or keep them out of the X-Men's hands so that the X-Men can't tell that something big is going to happen. And it's pretty obvious that this is referring to Messiah Complex and the stuff that's going to follow Messiah Complex a little bit after that event. And basically, like I said, it's just setting up Messiah Complex. It doesn't really feel like its own story, so it's really difficult for me to talk about this. One thing I did not like about this is that it really, basically, it destroys the premise of this series. You had Rogue had her very own team of supervillains and superheroes working together, and I liked that. I liked the dynamic that all of these characters had together in the previous storylines, and then this book kind of just takes all of that and destroys it. You've got Lady Mastermind and Mystique. It turns out they are both spies working within the X-Men. Mystique, I understand, because she hadn't been in a coma for a really long time, and she had been with the X-Men since the end of Peter Milligan's run, so not that long before this book, but for a few years, maybe about 2 years, I think. But Lady Mastermind, they found her in a coma right at the beginning of Mike Carey's run on X-Men, so I don't know if Mr. Sinister was working with her before she went into a coma, or if after she came out of a coma, if Mystique said, hey, do you want to work with me? I'm working with Mr. Sinister and Exodus and all these other guys over here, and then Lady Mastermind says, yeah, it would be fun to betray the X-Men. I have no idea, but someone suggests that Mystique has been waiting in prey, I guess you could say, for a little while now. She's been waiting to attack the X-Men, but I don't understand when Lady Mastermind joined this group of bad guys who betrayed the X-Men. I have no idea. And then Omega Sentinel gets taken over by Malice, who is a character who used to, she just existed kind of like a ghost. She would possess people. She possessed Polaris for a really long time, but then now apparently she's gone digital. Omega Sentinel is connected to a computer, and she accidentally downloads Malice. To be honest, that's kind of stupid. She has this really dumb line where she says, Malice has now gone digital. That was really dumb. So anyway, Rogue's team has basically just been destroyed. Cable is presumed dead. Rogue is in a coma and has been captured by Mr. Sinister and his group. So the only ones who are actually left are Cannonball and Iceman. And Scott even tells Iceman, listen, my idea of letting Rogue choose her own team to go out and protect us, that didn't really work out because most of her team is now gone. Sabretooth, he escaped sometime during the events of the Hecatome storyline, so now he's gone. Basically, everyone that Rogue had on her team is either dead or has betrayed the team. And I didn't like that. I kind of like the idea of the villains and the heroes working together, and I would have liked to have seen that play out a little longer, instead of basically just a year and a half. You had the Supernovas, the initial Supernovas arc was 6 issues long, and then the next 2 arcs after that were 3 issues each, and then this one right here is about 4 issues long. So not even a year and a half that we got to see that premise this in action. And I would have liked to have seen it a little longer. I would have liked to have seen some of these characters interact a little bit more with the heroic X-Men, and eventually you can have the bad guys betray the good guys. That's fine, but I would have liked for it to have come a little later on down the line. And I will go ahead and say, after Messiah Complex, Mike Carey kind of briefly took a hiatus from the Rogue stuff, and he was doing a solo Professor X ongoing story, and then eventually he returned to having the series be focused on Rogue, but he never went back to having a full-on team dynamic that he had before Messiah Complex. And I was never as much of a fan of the post-Messiah Complex stuff that Mike Carey did as I was the stuff with Rogue and Sabretooth and Lady Mastermind and all of that. So this kind of signaled the end of what I was really enjoying about Mike Carey's run. Now, I will go ahead and say that this book, I don't think that a lot of it is Mike Carey's fault. I think that a lot of this stuff, the editor said, okay, we're going to be doing this thing called Messiah Complex. We want to use Mr. Sinister. We want to do X, Y, and Z, and we need you to set all that up in your book. And so he kind of said, well, okay, I guess I got to do it. Editors say I have to do it. They're my bosses, so I'm going to do it. I don't think that Mike Carey actually necessarily wanted to go in this direction. I remember years ago, back before this storyline even came out, I remember reading an interview of things that Mike Carey said that he wanted to do in this X-Men book, and there were things that he said that he wanted to do, like he wanted to bring Angel onto the team, Warren Worthington III. He wanted to explore Iceman's relationship with Mystique. There were things that he said he wanted to do that he never got around to doing. Now, the Iceman Mystique thing, that begins to play out here, and then she betrays the team, but then they still kind of sort of got this tension between them. And then after Messiah Complex, there was a anthology series, I don't remember the name of it, but we got to see a little bit more of the Iceman Mystique thing there, and I believe that was written by Mike Carey. So we do get to see a little bit of that play out, but it's pretty obvious that Mike Carey had things that he wanted to do in the series that he was unable to do because of the events of Messiah Complex. So even though I don't like this book very much at all, I won't blame it on Mike Carey, because I think a lot of it is he was writing at the wrong time. If he had been writing X-Men 3 years earlier, he wouldn't have had any of these X-Men crossovers that really started happening way too often, starting with Messiah Complex. Starting with Messiah Complex, basically you had at least one X-Men crossover every year, and that's pretty much continued even till today. So I think if Mike Carey had been allowed to operate more in a vacuum and he didn't have to worry about what other writers and editors wanted to do, then he could have done a really fantastic series, and this could have been as good, if not better, than Supernovas. But as is, this basically just exists to set up Messiah Complex, and so I don't really like this book as much as I think I could have. So those are my thoughts on X-Men Blinded by the Light. I hope that you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you did like this video, then I do other videos like this every Monday. I talk about X-Men frequently. I'm not sure what I want to do next. I don't know if I want to talk about Messiah Complex again. Years ago, I did a review on Messiah Complex, but it's been a long time. Maybe I can talk about that again if everyone wants to see me talk about that. But I will do some kind of X-Men video next week. I'm not really sure what I want to do, and I do other videos throughout the week, so be sure to check those out as well. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you later. Have a good one.